So let's move on now to an old school table and look at how we can at least clean up the styling using CSS. So let's close out of these, and we're done with Robin's order page for the moment. Let's load a different site in now, Manage Sites, New Site, and call this one, you guessed it, the chocolate game. And I've included a version of this site in the same lesson folder. You'll find it in the Lesson 8 folder, here in your project files. Just choose the chocolate game folder and then select it. And let's go ahead and get the images selected. Okay. Now let's start by opening the old school table. And let me show you why I consider this table kind of old school. I'm going to go ahead and reduce the size of my Properties Inspector at the bottom of the page here. If you're on a Mac, you can move this down a little bit as well. Just want to have a little more room here as we spend a little time looking at the HTML code. If you're not familiar with HTML code, bear with me. As I've been promising, there is a survival HTML lesson toward the end of this series. But I think you'll be able to follow along with the basics of what I'm going to show you, even if you're not very experienced yet with HTML. As I scroll down in this design with my cursor in the code view, I want you to see that as I get into the content, here where I've got formatted text under each of these images, yes, these very important instructions on how to play the chocolate game, these have been formatted with the strong tag, with the font color and font face. This is what's called inline styling. It means that the code that controls the display of this text is included right next to the text. And although that's how most web pages used to be created, and I'm probably still guilty of a few pages floating around the internet with this kind of code in them, it's definitely not the most efficient way to format your pages, and it's not the recommended way today. There are a number of reasons for that, but think about it this way. If I want to change the style of this page sometime in the future, if I decide I want this text to be a different shade of yellow or a different font face, I'll have to change it every time this text appears on the page, because this text is styled separately from this text, and then I'd have to change it here, and then I'd have to change it again here. If I had created a CSS style, as I will in a moment, then I could make one change and alter all of that text at once. So one of the big advantages of CSS is simpler updates and simpler revisions in the future. Another advantage is much lighter HTML pages. All this extra code does eventually slow down the page load. So the first thing I want to do as I edit this HTML table is to remove all this extra code so that I can reformat it with CSS and have a cleaner design. And there are a number of ways to strip out code like this. The simplest and one of the most obvious is just to highlight it in the HTML code here and then delete it. Just make sure that if you take the opening tags, you take the close tags that correspond. We just took the opening strong and the opening font tag. I need to take the close strong and close font tag for that to be removed. So that removed all of the styling from that text. Now here, you see I have exactly the same styling again. I could remove that again by deleting it here, or you can just put your cursor anywhere in this text and then use the tag selector and watch this. If I right-click here and choose Remove Tag, Dreamweaver removes the open and the close tag automatically. So I can do the same thing with font. Remove tag, and it's gone. So I find that a simpler, faster way to clean up code like this, to use the tag selector. If you have lots of code that's the same, if you know, for example, that you've used the strong tag several times on the same page, and you've used it the same way every time, then you can use Find and Replace to remove it. So let's copy that. And under the Edit menu, you'll find Find and Replace. Notice that Dreamweaver already has the strong tag here because I've already selected it. And my goal is to replace it with nothing. So I'm going to leave the Replace field blank. Also make sure that you're looking only in the current document and that you're searching in the source code. By the way, you can use Dreamweaver's Find and Replace to search across your entire site, to search through a folder, or to search through a collection of open documents all at once. It's a very handy way to make global changes. But you do want to be careful when you do this, because there's no good way to undo it if you make a mistake. So I'm going to replace the strong tag with nothing. Choose Replace, Replace, and I can just replace all to get all of them. Dreamweaver gives me a little report at the bottom when it's done. And now remember, if you're using this trick and you've used a tag that has an open and a close, you'll also need to use Find and Replace for that close tag. So let's go back to Find and Replace with the close tag selected and make sure we replace close strong the same way. So now I've removed all of the strong, most of the font tags. Let's take the last few font tags out like this. You can just click to select it, right-click and remove the tag. Down here I have some funky code as well, as you'll see if I open up Code View a little more. And let me close this panel group at the bottom. We're done with Search and Replace. And now let's get rid of the red in these H2 tags. So I can just delete that down here in the Property Inspector. All right. Select it, delete it. There we go. Sometimes you have to really convince it that you want it to go away. So we'll delete that. And now we've gotten rid of all of that inline styling. All those font tags are gone. Much cleaner code now. And before we're done, we'll also get rid of all of this here in the table tag. And let's just go ahead and cut that out of here. So we have a nice, simple, clean table with no styling in the page.